Get out!" The words cut through the marble lobby, cold and sharp as a blade. At that very moment, the entire Sterling and Row building, where every breath was measured in profit, turned to look at a man in a worn hoodie. It was 8:47 a.m., winter pressing the city down with skin-cutting wind. The glass doors slid open, letting a rush of icy air sweep across the polished floor that mirrored every step. Crystal chandeliers hung like frozen clusters, scattering fractured light across the surface. At the desk, Clara Mills, 27, living by pastel schedules and a trained smile, glanced up, then quickly lowered her eyes. Grey hoodie, faded jeans, dusty sneakers, the chill of the street still clinging to him. In a second, she placed him into a safe mental box. Delivery. Backup. Unimportant. The man laid a hand on the counter. No knocking. No rush. The hand was calloused, yet neatly trimmed. Steady as still water. "I want to go to the executive floor," he said, his voice deep and clean, unshaken. The words dropped into the air like a pebble on glass, not breaking, but resonating. Clara kept her standard smile. "Do you have an appointment?" "No," he replied calmly. "I'll wait." That answer cracked open Pandora's box. 2 guards detached from the wall as if programmed. The taller one, shoulders stretched against his jacket, led the way. His professional courtesy made every request sound like an order. "Sir, the service entrance is on the side. This lobby is only for clients, and those with executive clearance." The man did not move. Light traced the straight bridge of his nose, chiseling a face unusually composed. "I'm not delivering anything," he said. "I came to visit. Name, please." "Daniel Hayes," Clara typed quickly. A frown formed like a crease of habit. No results, no employee code, no appointment, no existence. She lifted her eyes, then dropped them back to the hoodie, as if searching for a brand logo to reassess. "I'm sorry, you're not in the system." The moment tilted. The tall guard tightened his grip on the radio, voice lowering. "Then I'll have to ask you to step outside until we confirm." Daniel tilted his head slightly, pulled a phone from his pocket, and moved toward the leather chairs by the wall. "I can wait," he said, with a genuine smile. "Not waxed or forced. I have time." A ripple of discreet glances stirred across the lobby. A young nurse clutched her file folder to her chest. A middle-aged man adjusted his tie, reassured that his meeting with High Asset Division kept him safe. A new employee tried to read Clara's thoughts through her eyes, catching a flicker of unease mixed with self-satisfaction. I followed procedure. The rhythm slowed, like a camera pulling back from the crowd to capture every heartbeat in one still frame. In that silence, there was the scent of stone and bergamot, pride wrapped in steel and wool. Daniel opened his phone, the black screen reflecting like obsidian. For a second, his eyes lit up and dimmed, like a star behind a curtain. The elevator doors slid open. The atmosphere shifted. Victor Sloan emerged, 45, Harvard framed on his wall, and his ego framed over everything else. Midnight blue suit, sharp as a Japanese blade, shoes polished enough to mirror the ceiling. Each step carved an invisible orbit, forcing others to retreat half a beat. "What's going on?" Victor asked, his words mixed with expensive cologne, looking without truly looking. Clara straightened. "Mr. Sloan, someone wants access to the executive floor. His name is Daniel Hayes." Victor turned, eyes narrowing, as if checking a seam for flaws. His gaze scanned Daniel from hood to shoes, lingering on the worn hem of his jeans, then back again, a thin smile like a razor's edge. "Perhaps he's lost. We don't admit walk-ins to the executive level." Daniel rose. Not threatening, just direct. "I'm not lost. Are you sure you're in the right building?" Victor tilted his head, the haughty tone of someone too used to being right. "Exactly where I need to be," Daniel said. A faint crease appeared at the corner of Victor's eye, vanishing like a fingerprint on glass. He leaned toward Clara, lowering his voice within a small radius. "Flag security. If he stays more than 10 minutes, escort him out." Then he walked away, leaving cedarwood scent and a day's worth of scheduled steps. The tempo quickened. 2 associates swapped shifts. A VIP swiped his card, green light blinking like an eye. In the corner, Daniel sat down, texting. Message sent, gone. Lobby, observation round 1 complete. Reflex, exclusion. Key staff, receptionist, security, COO. He turned off the screen, leaned back like a fisherman dropping bait in deep waters. In Clara's head, thoughts scrolled like subtitles. Why do people always push past procedure? What if he is important? No way. Just look at his clothes. But that voice, so calm. She drew a deep breath, reassuring herself with the rule printed above the desk. Security. Accuracy. Respect. Respect, she repeated silently, but the word felt heavier than usual. The tall guard stood at an angle, eyes sweeping like radar. He had worked in places where violence didn't wear polished shoes. He knew the most dangerous men rarely raised their voices. In the man in the hoodie, there was an order that unsettled him. The order of someone used to making decisions. "Who are you waiting for?" he asked, not for an answer but to hear the tone. "I'm waiting for the truth," Daniel said, like dropping a stone into a well. Time stretched like rubber. The wall clock ticked, marking each prejudice exposed in the grand lobby. A mid-level employee walked past, glanced at Daniel, caught the guard's eye, and quickly pretended to be busy with his phone. Fear of being misunderstood always made people move faster. Cold air swept in again as the glass doors opened. An elderly woman in a heavy coat fumbled for her card. Daniel rose quickly, smoothly, holding the door for her, steadying it gently. A small gesture, unboastful. She grasped his hand, thanked him, her clouded eyes warming. For a moment, Clara felt exposed. She had not done what the face of the brand should have. A strange feeling crept through her chest, both shame and irritation. Irritation at herself. "Mr. Hayes." The voice sliced the air, cold enough to leave frost. Victor had returned, this time with 2 assistants trailing like shadows. "We cannot allow you to sit here indefinitely. No one upstairs is expecting you." Daniel looked up, eyes calm as a still lake. "I'm waiting for this building." "Please leave." The moment tightened, like a safety catch on its final click. The invisible camera zoomed in, the grain of the counter, the cold edge of a keycard, the faint blue vein on Clara's wrist, steam rising from a paper coffee cup. Then the pace jumped. Sudden, urgent. The guard stepped closer. Victor's aides held a memo ready. Clara prepared to call legal if needed. Daniel stood. He was not taller than the guard, not heavier than Victor, not louder than the lobby. But when he rose, the sound seemed to dip half a note. His eyes swept the room, recording every face, not resentful, just noting. "All right," he said, voice dropping lower. "I'll leave." He turned. 3 steps, 5 steps. His hand touched the glass door. Cold air pressed, waiting to burst. Then he paused, half-turned. His eyes met the Sterling & Rowe logo embossed on the black stone wall, like a vow carved in rock. A faint curl at his lips. "I'll leave and I'll be back." The doors slid open. Daniel walked out. No one applauded a man just escorted away. But hours later, in the minds of those who had witnessed it, his words echoed like a hammer striking memory. Clara sat, fingertips cold. She opened her inbox, drowning the moment in schedules and procedures. But the image of Daniel holding the door for the old woman returned, stubborn, irritating like a smudge on glass that would not wipe away. I followed protocol, she told herself. I did it right. Yet somewhere another voice whispered, but was it right for the person? The tall guard leaned against a column, listening to his gut. His professional instinct, the one that had kept him safe, was restless. This guy isn't trouble, he thought. This guy is waiting for a roll call. Victor walked past mirrored panels, his reflection fragmented into sharp angles. In his mind, he ticked boxes. Contained, done. Hand to HR, if repeated. Add security note. His world was filled with boxes, anything out of place pushed back to the curb. He didn't notice the executive board notice he'd just passed. Quarterly shareholder meeting, next week. Guest, Ironcrest Holdings. Outside, Daniel stood beneath bare trees, breath mixing with fog. He sent a short message. 0 mark complete. Cultural reflex. Exclusion. Standardization. Proceed to step 1. The text vanished into the system like ink in water. He slipped the phone away, tugged the hood. None inside the lobby, not Victor, not Clara, knew the building's new ownership card lay in his inner pocket, beside a slim envelope embossed Ironcrest Holdings Ownership Access. The plot twist didn't explode like fireworks. It unfolded quietly like an automatic door, at the right time, in the right place. Daniel Hayes, 38, the man escorted from the company lobby, was the controlling shareholder of Sterling & Rowe, and that morning he hadn't come to be welcomed. He came to see whether bows here bent to power or to people. Winter wind flipped the edge of his hoodie as he walked away, calm as someone who already knew exactly how he would return. Inside the glass, the lobby clock kept ticking. Those who thought they had pushed out a lost stranger from a place for the important didn't know they had just pushed out the owner, giving him the perfect vantage point to begin an unflinching cultural audit. The headquarters plaza of Sterling & Rowe rang with footsteps on cold stone. But Daniel Hayes heard nothing except the steady, quiet beat of his own heart. He stood beneath a spindly tree, his breath blending into the winter mist like fragile wisps of smoke. To outsiders, he was just a failure thrown out through gleaming glass doors. But in his inner pocket, the card of power lay still, a card that, with a single swipe, would make this entire building bow. Daniel was the controlling shareholder, the new owner of Sterling & Rowe. 6 days earlier, Ironcrest Holdings, the investment group he founded, had closed a multi-billion-dollar acquisition. The press had not yet reported it, because Daniel had ordered absolute secrecy, no celebration, no grand announcement, no champagne exploding in a boardroom. He chose the dark, because light only reveals what people want to show, while darkness exposes the truth. He wanted to see exactly how Sterling & Rowe operated, before it had time to adjust its posture for the new owner. And in just the first morning, Daniel had his answer. The system here did not care who you were. It looked only at the clothes you wore, the shoes on your feet, the color of your skin. If you did not fit the template, you were excluded at the threshold. His phone buzzed softly in his hand. A message from Evelyn Cho, Ironcrest's head of legal, 0 mark recorded. Do you want to move to the next observation phase? Daniel glanced at it, the corner of his mouth lifting slightly. He typed back, proceed. No intervention. I want the truth to reveal itself. On the 20th floor, Victor Sloane stood before a wide pane of glass, looking down at the lobby. A streak of suspicion crept into his gaze. He remembered the stance of the man in the hoodie. Something was off. Not like hurried delivery guys. Not like a walk-in who found the wrong floor. That stance carried a steady confidence, the bearing of someone who chose rather than someone waiting to be chosen. "Mr. Sloane?" a secretary prompted, hesitant. "We start the strategy meeting in 10 minutes. "Yes." Victor nodded, but a vague unease stirred inside him. He had always trusted his ability to read people. It was the skill that helped him climb to COO. But with the guy in the hoodie, it felt like he had missed an extremely important detail in the picture. Meanwhile, Daniel had left the building and slipped into the narrow alley behind it, where a sleek black sedan was waiting. The driver bowed, ready to open the door. Daniel lifted a hand to stop him. "No need. I'll walk." He wanted to feel the city with his own feet, to let the cold sink into his skin and carve this morning deeper into memory. Inside Sterling and Row, Clara sat before her screen, but her hands could not strike the keys. She remembered Daniel's calm eyes when he said, "I have time." That voice did not sound like someone lost. It sounded like someone testing them. Clara shook her head, trying to banish the unease. "He's just an outsider," she whispered, shoring herself up with training rules. But in a deep corner of her mind, the sentence no longer felt solid. Daniel walked on, each step firm. He thought back on his journey, beginning in a cramped apartment, where even the streetlight slipping through the blinds became the only source of illumination for long nights of market analysis. He had worn this very hoodie for years, like armor against contemptuous looks. And now, to the people in the Sterling and Row lobby, he was still a delivery guy. That repetition didn't make him angry. It made him smile. Because this time the game was different. In his mind, each rung of the plan lit up like a row of LEDs. Step 1. Observe how employees react to an outsider who does not fit the mold. Step 2. Infiltrate the internal culture. Listen and record. Step 3. Find the talented individuals the system is holding down. Step 4. Expose the truth at a moment no one expects. Everything was on track. And this morning, with Clara's disdainful look, Victor's arrogance, the guard's suspicious eyes, was only the prelude. That afternoon, in a small cafe a few blocks from the building, Daniel sat alone by the window, hand turning a hot cup, eyes on the rush outside. He wrote in a black leather notebook, "Main lobby, the first barrier. Staff respond by template. The system filters by appearance. Lesson, exclusionary culture." He underlined it 3 times, then closed the notebook. For a moment, Daniel closed his eyes. The surrounding sounds faded into a distant score. He saw his father years ago, a janitor wiping footprints from these very kinds of marble floors, being barked at by security, treated like a shadow. "Never let them define you, Daniel," his father's voice echoed in memory. "You will walk into places like these, not with a mop, but with a signature." Daniel opened his eyes. A thin smile appeared. He had done it. And now he would force the entire system to face what it always avoided. That dignity is not in the suit, it is in the person. Elsewhere in the building, Victor Sloane folded his arms and stood before the senior leadership, holding forth about lean cost strategy. But in his head, the image of the man in the hoodie kept circling like a spreading ink blot on white paper. Who is he really? Victor thought. And that very question would begin a string of uneasy days, leading him to a confrontation for which he was utterly unprepared. As for Daniel, when the evening shadows stretched along the sidewalk, he closed the black notebook and murmured to himself, "The cultural audit begins." On the third day after that chaotic morning, Sterling and Row still gleamed like a fortress of power. Elevators slid up and down endlessly, carrying expensive suits, polished leather briefcases, and flawless smiles. But somewhere among those streams of people, a quiet shadow moved, Daniel Hayes. He no longer appeared in the lobby as a stranger. Instead, he became a faint presence within the building, borrowing an old name badge, slipping into unnoticed meeting rooms, blending into the back rows of strategy sessions. He moved like smoke, unchallenged and unseen, because Sterling and Row had grown accustomed to one cultural habit, paying attention only to what they believed was important. Daniel listened. He wrote. He observed. And what he saw chilled his blood. In a morning meeting, a black employee named Marcus began sharing an idea about improving the credit process, only for the executive to cut him off. "We don't have time for small details. Keep it brief." A young woman, Olivia, proposed a creative marketing campaign. No one responded. 5 minutes later, a male manager repeated the exact same idea, changing only a few words. The whole room nodded in praise. Daniel sat quietly at the end of the table, fingers tapping steadily on the cover of his black notebook. The marks in his notes multiplied, interrupted, dismissed, stolen, credit misplaced. Each mark was a blade carving into the company's image. But then, amid the monotony of reports and hollow authoritative voices, Daniel heard a different tone. It was the voice of Sophia Lane, a 32-year-old logistics analyst. She wasn't loud. Her voice was low and firm, like a steady undercurrent. Sophia explained the bottlenecks in the shipping chain, pinpointing choke points at transfer ports and proposing optimized routes that could save millions. Daniel straightened, eyes fixed on her. He saw the precision in each word she chose, the clarity in how she built her points. This wasn't idle talk, it was sharp intellect, buried under layers of indifference. But as soon as Sophia finished, silence filled the room. A heavy pause. Then manager Todd Harris, hair slicked back, bright red tie, gave a dismissive chuckle. "Good idea, but we'll revisit it later. Maybe there's a simpler way." "We'll revisit later," 4 fatal words in any boardroom. They meant, forget it. Sophia nodded, lips pressed tightly. No protest, no argument. She was too used to being brushed aside, a figure that filled a diversity slot in the reports, but never the spotlight. Watching it unfold, Daniel's chest tightened. He wrote another line in his notebook, "Talent ignored. Culture suppresses." That afternoon, in a small break room, Sophia stood before a pot of coffee, gone cold since morning, pouring herself a bitter cup. Daniel walked in, holding a stack of old reports. He stopped in front of her, eyes steady. "I heard your presentation this morning," he said. Sophia startled, turning quickly. You were in there." "Yes. Back row, left corner. But on my badge it said Jacob." Long story. A flicker of surprise, then Sophia laughed, rare and genuine, unguarded. "So you're Jacob." Daniel nodded. "Your model was sharp. Why did they dismiss it?" Sophia stayed silent for a moment, then sighed. "Because it wasn't their idea. And because I'm not the kind of person they want to hear from." The answer struck like a hammer. Daniel looked into her eyes, tired but unbroken. "How long have you been here?" 5 years, Sophia replied bitterly. "I trained 3 people, All three are now my bosses." Daniel's grip tightened around the notebook. The story had never been clearer. This wasn't personal failure. This was the system. A machine built to reinforce a closed loop, celebrating only one kind of person, men like Victor Sloan, like Todd Harris, while pushing everyone else to the edges. Sophia studied him, suspicion and curiosity flickering in her gaze. "You don't work in logistics, do you?" Daniel paused, choosing his words. "No. My job is to see who really shows up when they think no one is watching." Sophia narrowed her eyes, as if sensing an unfinished puzzle piece. But then she gave a weary smile. "Then you'd better watch closely. This place has more layers than you think." Leaving the break room, Daniel walked down the hallway, his eyes catching on a poster pinned to the notice board. Leadership Development Program. 10 faces in the photo, all white, all male. In the center, Victor Sloan with his arms draped around 2 of them, grinning like a medal presenter. The message was as cold as glass. Success had only one face. Daniel pulled out his phone and typed quickly. "Observation, systemic exclusion. Recommend cultural audit. Track Sophia Lane's progress." He saved it under a coded entry. The full picture was coming together. In the upper office, Victor Sloan remained unsettled. The image of the man in the hoodie lingered, not just because of his unusual presence, but because of the way he watched. Not like a passerby. Like someone calculating. Victor picked up the phone and called Charles Denton, head of IT. "I want you to check. There's a man he's appeared several times recently. Security hasn't reported anything, but I don't believe it. Sweep the system, see if he's touched anything." On the other end, Charles was silent for a moment, then answered. "I'll run a full scan of all internal access, Mr. Sloan. If he touched any data, we'll know." Victor set the phone down, eyes drifting toward the city skyline. A low unease stirred within him. Sterling and Rowe had always been his stage, but for the first time, he felt like someone else was writing the script. Daniel left the building as darkness fell. Yellow light spilled onto the sidewalk, stretching his shadow long like a black stroke of ink. In his hand, the black notebook felt heavier than usual, filled with fresh notes, living evidence. He looked up at Sterling and Rowe, towering like an impenetrable citadel, but Daniel only smiled and kept walking. He had already seen the first crack. And once a crack appeared, no fortress could stand forever. Sunset cast a fiery red over the glass of Sterling and Rowe, but inside the top floor, Victor Sloan's office was filled with something else. Suspicion. He stood before the glass wall, gripping his pen like a weapon. The image of the man in the hoodie, the one he had dismissed in the lobby, kept flashing in his mind. Victor had never lost a match in his life. He believed he could read people as quickly as a balance sheet. But with that stranger, something was off. He hadn't trembled, hadn't looked confused like someone who didn't belong. Instead, his eyes had been calm, like someone auditing him. Victor dialed a number. On the other end, Charles Denton, head of IT 39, cybersecurity expert with eyes hidden behind thick glasses, answered. "Charles, I want an urgent report. There's a guy in a hoodie who keeps showing up in the building. I don't believe he's just a visitor. Scan the entire system. If he touched data, I want every detail." Charles hesitated for a beat. "Mr. Sloan, we did find something unusual. The Jacob account that's been used these past few days accessed HR files, supply chain data, and even shareholder documents from the merger." Victor's voice hardened. He knew exactly where to look. "Yes," Charles replied. "Not random. He has insider knowledge." Victor bit his lip. His instinct had been right. Print every log. Bring them to me before the end of the day. And listen carefully. No one outside this office hears about this. Understood? Understood, sir. Victor slammed the phone down. His eyes glinted cold as steel. The man in the hoodie wasn't just a nuisance, he was a threat. And Sterling and Rowe had no place for threats. The next morning, Sophia Lane arrived at the office and received an email, weekly operations meeting, updated list. She scrolled down, searching for her name. It wasn't there. Her brow furrowed. For 5 years, she had always attended this meeting. Her heart sank. The familiar feeling returned, being cut from a game she had helped set up. Sophia hurried to HR. Waiting there was Kelsey Morgan, 29, HR representative with darting eyes. Her voice shook. Sophia, we need you for a short compliance conversation. Compliance? Sophia frowned. What is this about? Kelsey lowered her voice. There's a complaint that you shared internal data with someone unauthorized. Sophia's blood froze. Excuse me, what? I have never... The report says there was suspicious activity linked to a profile with access close to yours. Sophia stepped back, chilled to the core. One word echoed in her head. Trap. That afternoon, Daniel stood by the vending machine, holding an old report as if casually reading, but his eyes kept scanning, listening, recording. Then Sophia appeared. Her face was tense, her voice dulled and ragged with fury. You may have just cost me my job. Daniel looked up, his eyes steady. What happened? Victor told HR I leaked data. They dragged me into a small room, interrogated me like I was a spy. Do you understand? I'm being treated like a traitor. Just because I sat with you in the break room and spoke a few words? Daniel's jaw tightened. You didn't leak anything. That doesn't matter. In this place, perception is enough. They don't need proof to destroy the career of someone like me. In Sophia's eyes there was a storm of anger, despair, and fear of being crushed. Daniel saw it clearly. Inside him, a wire of steel vibrated. I'll fix it, he said slowly. Sophia let out a dry laugh. Fix it? You've never even said who you are. A man in a hoodie, using the name Jacob, wandering around, and now you claim you can fix this entire system. Daniel was silent for a beat, then spoke, voice low but with eyes blazing like fire. I'm not a wanderer. I came here to change this place. Sophia looked at him, doubtful, but in his tone she sensed something heavy and true. A promise or a burden, she wasn't sure. All she knew was that before leaving, she whispered, If you really mean to change things, do it fast, because they'll crush me before you manage anything. Her figure vanished behind the doorway. Daniel stood still, fingers crushing the aluminum can in his hand until it cracked. He knew. The game was no longer observation. They had fired the first shot, and it was time for him to respond. That evening, in a riverside hotel, Daniel opened his laptop. The blue glow lit his face, carving his features into sharp lines. He drafted an email to the Ironcrest team. Victor Sloan is suspicious. HR used Sophia as a shield. This was the first strike. Do not intervene directly. I need more evidence. Prepare soft reveal within 48 hours. Internal audit team ready. He paused, staring at the blinking cursor. In his mind, his father's voice echoed, Never let them define you. Daniel pressed send, and with that motion, he knew the real battle had begun. Monday. The sky was draped in leaden grey, misty rain falling like a thin curtain, hiding a storm that was quietly approaching. In the grand lobby of Sterling and Rowe, the man in the hoodie was nowhere to be seen. Instead, Stunned eyes followed a man in a perfectly tailored navy suit, walking with the calm rhythm of someone who knew every stone beneath his feet already belonged to him. Daniel Hayes. No hoodie, no image of being cast out. He strode through the lobby, flanked by two senior partners of Ironcrest Holdings, faces well known across the financial world. Clara Mills, the receptionist, dropped her pen. Only a week ago she had pushed him out like a nameless nobody. Now his presence pulled the air from her lungs. The tall guard who had once prepared to escort him out stood instinctively straighter, sweat trickling down his neck. Daniel said nothing. He simply raised his ownership card and swiped it. The soft ding rang out, light but powerful enough to change the color of every glance. The green light flashed. Owner access confirmed. The elevator doors opened, as if bowing in respect. Upstairs, the quarterly shareholder meeting had begun. The boardroom reeked of leather chairs, freshly printed reports, and the smug air of men convinced they held control. Victor Sloan stood at the head of the table, every inch the commander, speaking about streamlining operations and optimizing costs, hollow phrases he had used for years to maintain power. His voice echoed confidently, drawing empty nods of agreement. The door opened. Every head turned. Victor froze mid-sentence. A heavy silence crashed over the room. Daniel entered, slow but assured. He did not ask permission. He did not bow. He simply pulled out the empty chair at the head of the table, the chair Victor occupied, and sat as if it had always been his. Victor forced a stiff smile. Ah, what a surprise. Mr. Hayes, isn't it? An honored guest. Daniel met his eyes, his voice deep and resonant like a bronze bell. Not just a guest. I think it's time we meet properly. One of the Ironcrest partners stood and spoke clearly. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce. This is Daniel Hayes, controlling shareholder and new owner of Sterling & Rowe. The acquisition was completed 2 weeks ago. The room erupted in murmurs. Pens dropped. Faces exchanged looks of shock and unease. Victor's smile faltered, his gut twisting like a blow had landed. He turned toward Daniel, bitterness edging his tone. You certainly know how to make an impression. Daniel leaned back in his chair. No need to raise his voice. I'm not here to impress. I'm here to see the truth. And the truth is, when I walked into this building as an ordinary man, you treated me like garbage. The silence thickened. Breaths slowed. In the past few days, Daniel continued, his voice steady and firm. I observed how your people are treated. I saw talented employees cut off, dismissed, their ideas stolen and rewarded to others. I saw a system where power doesn't come from skill, but from looking the part, sounding the part, sitting in the right seat. A compliance officer at the far end coughed nervously, eyes darting. Daniel's gaze locked on Victor. You treated me like an intruder. But I wasn't angry. I know you weren't afraid of me. You were afraid of what I represent. Change. Victor pressed his lips together, forcing a smile. Of course, we are ready to align with your vision. Daniel did not answer. He let silence settle, heavy and suffocating, forcing Victor to bow further under its weight. When the meeting ended, Victor followed Daniel into the hallway, his breath short, his tone straining to regain dominance. Listen, Mr. Hayes, I didn't know who you truly were. You appeared suddenly. We weren't prepared. You caught us off guard. Daniel stopped, turned, his eyes cold but free of malice. No, I didn't catch you off guard. I showed you yourselves. I didn't come here to humiliate anyone. I came to rebuild. But if someone stands in the way, I will remove that obstacle. The elevator doors opened. Daniel stepped inside. Before they closed, he tilted his head and spoke words that froze Victor's blood. "This isn't a surprise, Victor. This is a test." The doors shut, leaving Victor Sloane alone, throat tight, sweat cold against his skin, as if heralding the storm to come. But Victor was not one to yield. Back in his office, he grabbed the phone and dialed Gavin Cross, seasoned board member, 52, salt and pepper hair, and the smug smile of someone long accustomed to power. Victor's voice rasped. "Gavin, we're in trouble. That man, Hayes, will destroy us if we don't act." Gavin smirked. "So what do you propose? We stall every reform, twist the numbers, pin the blame on others, and when his credibility collapses, we deliver the final strike, a vote of no confidence. I will not let some stranger in a hoodie walk in and steal my throne." Victor's hands trembled with fury as they clenched tight. In his eyes, the battle line had been drawn. And Daniel Hayes? He did not yet know that he had just turned the meeting into the opening of a chess match, a match in which every move to follow would decide not only his fate, but the future of Sterling and Rowe. That night, the lights in Victor Sloane's office still burned, casting his long, distorted shadow across the glass wall. The wine glass on his desk was half empty, but the alcohol did not make him float. It only fueled the hatred rising inside him. Daniel Hayes. That name repeated in his mind like an irritating refrain. A man he had once dismissed in the lobby now sat in the owner's chair. In just a few days, he had stolen what Victor had spent a lifetime building: control. Victor dialed. On the other end, Gavin Cross's voice came slow, cold, and tinged with grey smoke. "I assume you didn't call just to complain." Victor lowered his voice, each word heavy as stone. "Gavin, Hayes will destroy everything. He wants to reform the culture, tear the system apart. If he succeeds, you and I are finished." Gavin chuckled softly, the laugh of a man who lived on schemes. "Then we can't let him succeed. We need to strip him of credibility. Once shareholders doubt him, one vote is all it takes to push him off the board." Victor turned his chair toward the city lights, a maze of brilliance. "We'll disrupt every report, twist the numbers, bend the deadlines, inflate costs. When he questions them, we'll pin the blame elsewhere. And I have the perfect pawn." "Which pawn?" "Sophia Lane," Victor sneered. She spoke to him, just close enough to turn into a weakness. "We'll build a story that Hayes favors her, manipulated by a subordinate. A questionable relationship. That's all it takes to bury them both." Gavin nodded on the other end. "I'll handle the rest, media. I know people at the Chicago Ledger. One sensational headline, one photo at the right moment, and the world will turn against him." The two men clinked glasses over the phone, not with wine but with conspiracy. In the dark, a hidden war had officially begun. The next day, Sophia Lane found her email access suddenly blocked. Routine meetings no longer listed her name. Colleagues who once greeted her now looked at her with wary, probing eyes. By noon, she was called to HR. Kelsey Morgan, the same nervous voice, informed her, "We've received reports that recent financial files showed irregular edits, and the last changes came from your account." Sophia froze. "That's a lie." I'm sorry," Kelsey cut in, eyes fixed on her notes, "but we have to suspend your access pending investigation." Sophia sat still, the ground gone beneath her feet. She knew instantly this was a trap. And she was the pawn Victor had chosen to shatter Daniel's career. Later that evening, Sophia found Daniel in a quiet hallway, a logistics report in his hand. Her face carried fury and despair. "They accused me of falsifying numbers. They said you are the reason. Do you understand? They want to use me as proof against you." Daniel looked into her eyes and saw both pain and collapse. His jaw tightened. "I promise you, Sophia, I'll wipe out this filth. They can target me, but they will not crush you." Sophia laughed bitterly. "Wipe it out? You haven't even told me who you really are. All I know is you're not some ordinary employee. They're right, you are a threat. And I'm being dragged into this storm without ever choosing." Daniel stepped closer, his voice dropping, honest enough to halt her in place. "I am the new owner of Sterling and Rowe, and I came here not to destroy, but to rebuild. But if they want war, war is what they will get." Sophia stepped back, stunned. For a moment she looked at him, not as the shadowy Jacob, but as a man bearing the weight of an upheaval. And in his eyes she saw the cold gleam of resolve, uncompromising. 2 days later, the Chicago Ledger unleashed an article that flooded social media with a headline, "New Sterling and Rowe owner faces ethics scandal. Favoritism toward subordinate. Interference in internal data." The image, Daniel in his grey hoodie, walking out of the company lobby on that first day. Beneath it, the caption hinted darkly, "A new owner with a suspicious disguise." The media storm exploded. Shareholders grew uneasy. The boardrooms filled with urgent calls. And in the middle of the chaos, Victor Sloan smiled, raising his glass, convinced he had cornered Daniel Hayes. But Victor didn't know. The man he had scorned, the one in the hoodie, had been preparing for this game all along. And every card Victor played was already within his calculations. Wednesday afternoon, grey clouds covered the sky. In front of Sterling and Rowe headquarters, camera flashes exploded one after another. Reporters pressed forward, microphones raised, shouting in unison. "Mr. Hayes, is it true you favored Sophia Lane? Did you alter financial reports to hide misconduct? Are you qualified to lead this company?" In the chaos of questions, Daniel Hayes said nothing. He walked out of the building in a perfectly pressed suit, his gaze calm. No reaction, no defense, only silence. That silence was so heavy it caused some reporters to pause their notes, as if they were watching a chess match where the opening move was not words, but emptiness. That night, the Riverside penthouse became a secret command center. Laptops glowed in rows, illuminating the tense faces of the Ironcrest team. On the table lay thick folders, external hard drives, stacks of system logs marked in red. Evelyn Cho, head of legal, leaned toward Daniel, her voice firm. "We traced it. All data edits were made after Sophia had logged out. The metadata proves clearly she was not responsible." She slid a file across. "And here is what you care about most. The edits came from a hidden account. But every log carries Victor Sloan's digital fingerprint. He was careful, but not careful enough. We have enough evidence to indict." Daniel turned the pages, his eyes sharp as a scalpel. In every line of data, he saw not just fraud, but the faces crushed by the system. Sophia, Marcus, Olivia, dozens of others. "And Gavin Cross?" he asked. Evelyn placed a USB on the table, her smile cold. "Call recordings. He conspired directly with Victor about manipulating the media. The plan for a no-confidence vote is all here too." Daniel leaned back. On the screen in front of him was the image of himself in the hoodie, the very photo the press used to smear him. He studied it for a long moment. Then a thin smile formed. "They think this version of me, the man in the hoodie, dismissed and ridiculed, is the easiest to destroy. But it is exactly this version that will finish them." In the days that followed, Daniel vanished from public view. No press conferences, no rebuttals, no explanations. He sank into silence. And in the business world, the silence of a powerful owner is more terrifying than a declaration. Shareholders whispered nervously. Employees muttered, "Where did he go?" The press speculated wildly. Has Daniel Hayes fled? Victor Sloan strolled his office, his swagger returning. He savored the feeling, the building once again under his control. At press briefings, he spoke words like stability, transparent governance, restoring trust. The media swallowed it whole, but deep inside, a shadow gnawed. Because someone like Daniel Hayes was not the type to vanish easily. In boardrooms, Victor smiled politely, but his heart quickened at the thought of that silence. Too silent, too deliberate. And Sophia Lane? She lived in hell. Once a promising analyst, she was now pushed into a cramped basement office between filing cabinets. The eyes of her colleagues had changed, pity mixed with suspicion. Some avoided her, afraid of guilt by association. One morning, Sophia found a yellow envelope on her desk. No sender. Her heart raced as her trembling hand opened it. Inside were printed data logs, time stamps, internal messages altered. At the bottom, one handwritten line. You were never alone. J.C. tears welled, not of despair, but of hope, something she thought had died under days of persecution. That afternoon, she entered a riverside co-working space where Daniel sat, wearing a dark sweater, laptop open, evidence neatly arranged. I thought you had left, Sophia said softly. Daniel looked up, his eyes bright. No, I've only been silent. And this silence isn't retreat. It's preparation. He turned the laptop toward her. On the screen, a dashboard showed the full chain of evidence, altered data logs, forged emails, recordings, independent audit reports, all connected into a complete map of guilt. Victor and Gavin think they win by creating noise, Daniel said, his voice low and steady. But noise is only a shell. Truth doesn't need to shout. It only needs to appear at the right moment, and when it does, it will crush every lie. Sophia's body trembled as she looked at the screen. What are you preparing for? Daniel smiled faintly, eyes like steel. Not to clear my name, to reset the standard for this entire company. This isn't retaliation. This is judgment. In a dark corner of the city, schemes had been set. But in silence, Daniel Hayes had forged a weapon stronger than any accusation. The truth. And once it was revealed, Sterling and Rowe would never be the same again. That day, the grand hall of the Grand Sterling Hotel shone brightly with lights. The quarterly shareholders' conference of Sterling and Rowe gathered hundreds of people, investors, media, board members. The sound of polite laughter and clinking glasses created a facade of prosperity. Victor Sloan appeared first, dressed in a sharp black suit, his confidence restored. Beside him, Gavin Cross chatted with reporters, a half smile hiding conspiracy. In both their minds, the script was perfect. Daniel Hayes disgraced, Sophia Lane turned into an accomplice, and soon the shareholders would vote out the imposter owner. Relax, Gavin whispered. This morning's article did the rest. He has no way to fight back. Victor nodded slightly, satisfied. The lights in the hall dimmed. Victor stepped onto the stage, his voice booming. Ladies and gentlemen, the past 3 months, Sterling and Rowe has faced turbulence. But we remained steadfast, preserving our core values. Today, I assure you, this company is still in the hands of those who know best how to guide it. Scattered applause followed, but many shareholders' faces showed hesitation. And then, a voice rang out from the back of the hall. No, that is a lie, and it's time everyone knows the truth. The hall erupted. Every head turned toward the door. Daniel Hayes entered, clad in a charcoal grey suit, his stride calm. Behind him was Sophia Lane, holding a presentation remote and a thick file stamped in red. Victor froze. The colour drained from his face, leaving only a rigid mask. What are you doing here?" Daniel walked toward the stage, his eyes sweeping across the room. "My name is Daniel Hayes. I am the controlling shareholder and the rightful owner of Sterling and Rowe. And everything you've heard these past weeks has been lies fabricated by your own executives." The screen behind him lit up. Not revenue charts or hollow promises, but a chain of internal emails, system log lines, and timestamps of altered data. Everything was clear. Sophia had been framed. Victor gave direct orders. Gavin orchestrated the media. Daniel pointed to the screen, his voice echoing. "These are system logs proving the financial reports were tampered with after Sophia Lane had logged out. These are recordings of calls between Victor Sloan and Gavin Cross, planning a no-confidence vote. And this?" He pressed a button. The screen played security footage. Victor in his office, sneering, "Let him think he's in control. He's just a delivery guy in a hoodie with a lucky bank account." A wave of shock rippled across the hall. Whispers exploded like a hive breaking apart. Daniel's voice lowered, each word cutting sharp as a blade. "They didn't just try to smear me. They tried to crush employees who dared to speak up, like Sophia. They wanted to preserve a system where only one kind of person gets heard while the rest are silenced. But Sterling and Rowe cannot survive like that." Sophia stepped forward, placing the file on the board's table. "This is the full report, verified by an independent auditing firm. There is no room left for excuses." An elderly shareholder stood abruptly, fury in his eyes as he glared at Victor. "Mr. Sloan, what do you have to say?" Victor stammered, sweat breaking out. "It's all a misunderstanding. Hayes fabricated this too. Enough." A firm female voice cut through. Ruth Barrett, chairwoman of the board, rose, her face like ice. "We will not accept deception. I move for an immediate vote. Remove Victor Sloan from his position as COO. Suspend Gavin Cross's privileges until the investigation concludes." Hands rose, one after another. None opposed. The decision was passed in utter silence. Security approached. Victor struggled, eyes wide, glaring at Daniel. "You think you've won? You'll regret this." Daniel did not flinch, his voice steady and cold. "No, Victor. No one has won. It's just that this company stops losing, starting today." As Victor and Gavin were escorted out, the hall fell into heavy silence. But this time, it was not the silence of fear. It was the silence of a verdict delivered. Daniel looked around, then spoke quietly. "I did not come here for revenge. I came to bring change. And this change will not only be in the executive chair. It will begin in every hallway, every meeting room, every employee whose voice was cut off. I promise you, from today, Sterling and Rowe will be rebuilt on fairness, not privilege." Applause broke out, at first scattered, then louder, swelling like rain drumming on a roof. And in that moment, Daniel Hayes was not just the new owner. He became the embodiment of a promise. The truth may be buried, but it cannot be destroyed. The shareholders' meeting ended like a courtroom trial. Victor Sloan and Gavin Cross were escorted out, leaving behind cold stares and a room in turmoil. But for Daniel Hayes, the battle was far from over. He knew that exposing two traitors might save the company from crisis, but the disease corroding its culture would remain, if not cut out completely. and he needed everyone to see why he had chosen Sterling and Rowe. That night, in a luxurious banquet hall reserved for investors, the air buzzed with anticipation. People expected Daniel to appear and celebrate his victory. Glasses of red wine had already been poured. Whispers rippled through the room. But when the spotlight hit the podium, the face that appeared was not one of triumph, but of a man carrying a heavy truth. "Tonight," Daniel began, his voice resonant yet slow, "we could call this a victory. But I didn't come here to celebrate. I came to tell you something I have kept hidden until now." The hall fell silent. "I didn't choose Sterling and Rowe by chance," Daniel continued. "I didn't stumble on an attractive investment opportunity. I knew this company. I knew its culture. And I knew very well the man you just saw thrown out of the boardroom, Victor Sloane." Murmurs broke out. Daniel raised his hand to quiet them. "I knew how he recruited, choosing those who looked like him, discarding anyone different. I knew of the closed-door meetings where promotions were decided before candidates even walked in. I knew who had been sidelined, who had their work stolen. And I knew because I had a connection no one expected." He paused. The room held its breath. Gavin Cross, once sitting at Victor's side, now suspended, was still a looming shadow. Daniel's voice dropped lower, steady as stone. "Gavin Cross was once married to my cousin." Through that family tie, I had long heard the stories from behind these walls. I knew about the private parties where careers were traded for glasses of wine and handshakes. I knew about the buried emails, the silenced voices. And I chose Sterling and Rowe because I had seen the cracks from within my own family. The hall erupted with gasps. Shareholders whispered frantically, their faces shifting color. Daniel drew a deep breath, his tone firm but sorrowful. "You think I bought this company to control another asset?" "No, I bought it to expose. Because if a corporation as large as Sterling and Rowe, a symbol of financial trust, can rot this deeply, then our system is sicker than we dare to imagine." He turned, his gaze locking onto the stunned faces before him. "And we cannot cure disease with patches. We must cut, we must expose, we must replace the blood." In the crowd, Sophia Lane stood still, her heart pounding. She had never known that Daniel's choice of this company was so deeply personal. His eyes now carried something different, not only those of an owner, but of a man bearing a painful legacy, determined to turn it into the strength to change. "Mr. Saul, I thought." Hayes, an elderly shareholder, rose, voice trembling. "If you knew from the start, why not reveal it sooner?" Daniel lowered his gaze, his eyes filled with both sadness and resolve. "Because if I had walked in wearing $1 million suit and the title of Billionaire, you would have welcomed me, pretended everything was fine. But I needed the truth. I needed to know how they treated someone they thought didn't matter. And only when I walked into that lobby in an old hoodie did I see their real faces." A round of applause broke out from the corner. At first, just a few, then spreading, louder and louder like summer rain. It was not the applause for a successful deal, but recognition for a man who dared to confront the truth and turn it into action. In the shadows at the back, Gavin Cross clenched his fists. He had not expected Daniel to drag their personal tie into the light. His face hardened, his eyes burning with hatred. But he also knew the game had changed. Daniel had not only defeated Victor, he had shattered the very circle of power Gavin had cultivated for years. Daniel stood tall, his final words striking like a gavel. "You want to invest in Sterling and Rowe? Then know this. From now on, This company will not be a fortress of privilege. It will be a symbol of fairness. And I swear, no one will ever be silenced here again, as Sophia once was. The spotlight caught Sophia's soft smile. In that moment, she was no longer a shadow in the boardroom. She was living proof of Daniel's words. That night, the headlines exploded. Daniel Hayes. From hoodie to owner. The shocking truth behind the Sterling and Rowe takeover. The story was no longer a rumor of scandal. It had become a declaration, an anthem. 6 months had passed since the night the shareholder hall erupted like a public courtroom. From the outside, Sterling and Rowe still gleamed as always, green glass panels reflecting the sky, orderly streams of people stepping into the lobby, polished suits striding through. But inside, the company's heartbeat had changed. On large posters plastered across the floors, the Diversity and Inclusion Leadership Program was announced, featuring a mosaic of faces, white, black, women, men, even employees once dismissed as not the right fit. That vibrant image replaced the old poster, the one filled only with white men linking arms under Victor Sloane's hollow smile. In a sunlit meeting room, Sophia Lane stood at the front with a presentation behind her. But this time she was no longer the analyst silenced and pushed aside. On the table before her lay a new nameplate, Director of Strategic Innovation. Sophia laid out her operational plan, her voice steady, each figure precise. When she finished, instead of the dead silence of the past, the room applauded. A few shareholders nodded in approval. In their eyes there was no suspicion, only recognition. At the end of the table, Daniel observed. He did not grin widely, just a faint smile, but his eyes shone with pride. This was the image he had longed to see. Someone once crushed by the system, now standing tall, leading, her voice untouchable. As for Victor Sloane, he had vanished from finance like a name erased. Rumors said he lived in Florida, others that he had opened a small consultancy in some corner of the city, but no one cared. Silence surrounded him like a fitting punishment. Gavin Cross met the same fate. Reputation stripped, connections severed. One by one his allies abandoned him. But Daniel's victory was not in the disappearance of enemies. It was in the presence of new faces, of voices once unheard. Sterling and Rowe was no longer a closed fortress, but an open community, where ideas were measured by merit, not by appearance or pedigree. One autumn evening, a soft wind swept across the rooftop terrace. The city stretched below, lights glittering like an ocean of stars. Daniel leaned against the railing, his gaze distant. Sophia joined him, holding a cup of hot tea. "I still wonder," she said, her voice tinged with curiosity and gratitude. "Why didn't you fight back when the media attacked you? Why did you stay silent so long?" Daniel drew a deep breath, his eyes fixed on the horizon. "Because they wanted me to respond with anger. If I had, I would have only reinforced their story. But the truth doesn't need to shout. It only needs to appear at the right moment. And when it does, the whole world has no choice but to listen." Sophia looked at him, a faint smile softening her face. "They've heard it now, and they won't forget." Daniel turned, his eyes bright but his tone solemn. "Sophia, this was never about you or me. It was about everyone who walked through these doors and was told, outright or silently, that they weren't enough. I wanted them to know that from now on, dignity can wear any clothing, even an old hoodie." Sophia laughed through glistening eyes. "You know they'll engrave that quote on the company's memorial plaque." Daniel smirked lightly. "If they do, Make sure your name is there too. Because this change wasn't just me, it was you as well. They stood together, gazing over the radiant city in silence. In that moment, Daniel was no longer a billionaire, Sophia no longer the trampled employee. They were two people proving that fairness is not a privilege, but a right that must be defended. The story of Sterling and Rowe did not end with the gavel of a boardroom, nor with a financial report. It ended with true change, the change of a culture, where those once excluded now stood tall, spoke, and were heard. And somewhere the reminder still echoed, never judge a person by the clothes they wear. Because sometimes the one in the old hoodie is the one rewriting the rules. The story has ended, but its echoes remain. Daniel Hayes proved that true power does not lie in the chair you sit in or the suit you wear, but in the resolve to stand firm when faced with injustice. Sophia Lane proved that a voice, once buried, can become the flame that ignites an entire company. And now the question is no longer for them, but for you, the one watching this story. If one day you walk into a room and are dismissed because of your appearance or someone's prejudice, will you bow your head in silence, or will you stand tall and turn that moment into a turning point that changes everything? Share your thoughts in the comments. Do not forget to like, subscribe, and share this video so more people will see that fairness is not a privilege. It is a right that must be defended. And sometimes, the one who changes the world is the very person everyone once underestimated.